The summer camp I used to work at suddenly closed after our last day there.
I can remember that last night at camp like it was yesterday. We sat just outside the newly refurbished cabins as a campfire crackled peacefully in the stone ring in front of us. The grass had been freshly mowed, and the scent of pine lingered in the air. The sound of crickets and other insects was all I could hear as they floated contentedly nearby. The intense heat of the afternoon had finally lessened, and the night sky felt pleasantly cool and refreshing. During the day, the sky was so blue, it almost hurt your eyes. But at night, it was all inky darkness, and the flickering light of the campfire was the only main source of light. I watched as tiny wisps of smoke slowly climbed into the sky before they disappeared into the dark pine branches. I was close enough to the fire that I watched as the coals pulsed with heat and the embers cast a soothing glow on the surrounding pines. By then almost everyone else had gone to bed, so it was just Violet and myself. We hadn't said anything to each other for a while, but I had a question I'd been meaning to ask. She was the head camp administrator and knew everything. It was Labor Day weekend, and with the final celebration over, there was just a tiny few of us left to close everything down for the start of camp next year. The end of summer atmosphere and the fact that the camp was now virtually deserted meant that it was the perfect chance to ask something that had been on my mind but for some reason I hadn't quite been ready to. Why don't we ever go across the lake to the land on the other side? We're not the only people who like to gather around the fire in the woods at night. I was unsure of how to take this. What do you mean? She paused, a hesitant look on her face. Depends on who you ask. I've seen some giant bonfires, some weird dancing, some screeching, and a group of people. But others say people have found things in the morning amidst some smoldering remnants of a fire. Bones that they can't be sure are animal or human. Some have sworn people were watching them. Not doing or saying anything, just silently watching. Either way, no one's ever bothered us out here, but never forget someone can always start. There was a silence that hung over the air. I knew she had more to say. What aren't you telling me? I asked. She sighed. I've told you what I've seen. That's it? But that doesn't mean I haven't heard things. I have. Whenever I see a giant bonfire, or better yet, I smell it because it doesn't smell like a normal bonfire, I hear things. Strange things I haven't heard anywhere else. Noises that don't sound completely human or completely animalistic. But the worst is when it's not a sight or a sound, but a feeling. Only a few times, maybe 4 or 5 in all the times I've been here, have I felt something, but you better believe that was enough. I've never felt such raw, animalistic fear. It's almost like it felt like a literal part of my DNA and it was so intense my body could barely contain it. It passed quickly, but you don't forget something like that. No, I'm sure you don't. The other thing is that even the fire isn't like normal fires. Even from a distance, it looks mostly normal, but there's some tiny difference that stands out. It's not a fire that invites you to sit around, roast marshmallows, and tell stories. It's a warning. For what exactly I don't know, but a warning is a warning all the same. Fair enough. Thanks for telling me. Sure. There's just one other thing. I don't know why or how it happens, but there have been a few times when I'm outside at night and all of a sudden, the sounds of insects stop buzzing and the frogs stop croaking. Completely and simultaneously. It's more than a little unsettling, and every time it happens, I get inside as quickly as possible. I never see or experience anything else, but something tells me to get inside now, she emphasized the final word. So that's what I do, and once inside, I slam the door shut. And nothing ever happened. But it beats the alternative. No doubt. Just remember. We tell campfire stories, but there are things out there that are the campfire story. We went to bed soon after that. By that time, the fire had burned down to a small glow, and the only lights were the ones scattered intermittently throughout the area. The rest of the area was completely dark, so I was paying close attention to my surroundings. I was halfway back to my cabin when I felt the sense that something had changed and not for the better. I quickly looked around, but everything looked exactly the same. So I kept on, trying to figure out what was different. Then it hit me. Everything was quiet. No mosquitoes shrilly whizzing by, or no crickets chirping away in the bushes. Everything had fallen completely silent. I could immediately see why Violet had the reaction she did. It was downright eerie. So I had a similar reaction, and sprinted the rest of the way to my cabin. It wasn't far, but in the darkness and with fear trickling down my neck faster than the sweat from my sprinting, The short distance felt like it had multiplied. When I finally had the door in sight, I frantically unlocked it, tugged it open, and slammed it shut before sliding the deadbolt in place. Only then did I take a deep breath and try to calm down. Everything was exactly in place, and the illumination that flooded the space did not reveal any unwanted surprises. Just like always, I had the cabin to myself, and that had not changed. Nor was there any commotion from outside, no pounding on the door or disembodied scream. Just the still summer night. So after a few more deep breaths, I tried to get ready for bed. Once I was under the covers, I switched off the light and looked out the nearby window. My bedroom is on the second floor, and it came with a window overlooking the nearby lake and forest. With the light off, I could just faintly see across the lake, and what looked like a fire just barely flickered from the other side. I don't know why, but I could tell it had just started, as it was just a sliver of a flame against the night sky. I could also faintly make out shadows moving near it. The sight sent a chill down my spine, and that chill immediately spread to the rest of my body when I saw the sight of what looked like a boat gliding across the lake's surface. It wasn't like any boat we had here, and the shadow inside it was too large to belong to anyone I knew. I lay there in shock, unsure of what to think or do. I'd been a camp counselor out here for years, and I'd never seen anything like this before. Sure, there were a couple times where I thought someone was watching me at night here or there, but it turned out to be nothing besides the usual feeling of being out there in the woods at night. The longer I lay there staring out the window, the more I half expected to see something or someone leering outside at me, but nothing happened. At some point I fell asleep and had the creepiest dream where someone in a cheap mask and a black cloak was watching me from the foot of my bed. They didn't do anything or say anything, they just stood there. So still it was unnatural. I eventually woke up to sunlight streaming through the windows. It was warm when I stepped outside, but you could feel summer was slipping away, and the pleasant weather made it easy to shake off what I'd felt the night before. It also didn't hurt that last night had been the last official night we were at camp, and we were all due to leave later tonight. So off I went in search of a quick breakfast that I found in the form of some cereal that Violet and Eric were also having outside. Once I grabbed a bowl, I joined them at a picnic table. "Sleep well, guys?" I asked them after I had started eating. "Okay," Eric said. "I had a crazy dream. Someone broke into my cabin and was watching me while they hid in my closet. Someone wearing a mask. That made me sit up straight, and I wasn't the only one." Violet was looking at both of us with an uneasy expression. "I had a bad dream too. People were lurking outside my window. 2 of them. Both in robes and masks." Then I told them about my dream. And I told them about what I'd seen and felt last night for good measure. Eric was pale when I was finished. "I saw that too," was all he could say. "And I swear I saw a procession of people with torches coming out of the woods right near the boundary of camp." The 3 of us sat there in total silence until Violet spoke. "Let's just get everything done and get out of here." That was fine by me, because with that ominous air hanging over everything we finished the few final matters in record time, and then the only thing left was for all the remaining counselors to hop in 2 cars and engage in our usual final camp ritual of a movie and pizza. Over the years we'd seen several movies on Labor Day weekend, from Raiders of the Lost Ark to Ghostbusters, but this year we were going to Aliens. I loved the original and I was looking forward to it. And I was not disappointed, because it was an incredible ride of a movie that we all enjoyed that somehow managed to make me forget what had happened the night before, if only for a short time. When it was done, we all went to the local pizzeria and treated ourselves. As always, it was a wonderful time. When we were all done, it was time to return to camp so we could pack up and head out. But the minute we arrived back at camp the good mood vanished immediately. Because right in front of the main lodge, all our luggage and personal belongings that we had already prepared and left in our cabins was all sitting out there waiting for us. And not just thrown on the ground and left in a giant mess either. All the bags and boxes were neatly arranged in separate piles for the person they belonged to. It was definitely odd. But if that was odd, everything else was downright spooky. Because written in bright red paint all over the main lodge were the words "Get out and don't come back" in giant letters. But even that wasn't the worst, because hands down the most awful part was the atmosphere. Everything felt heavy and unwelcome. The place looked exactly how we'd left it, but apart from that it was a different camp entirely. And the air was completely silent, just as it had been last night. Deep down, I knew exactly what it was. We were being watched. We all quickly looked at each other, and when Violet quickly whispered, Let's just go. That's exactly what we did. Without a word, we each took our belongings, loaded them into the 2 vehicles we had, and the minute we were ready we floored it out of there without or a second thought. But just as we were pulling out of the driveway, I looked behind us and saw what looked like the forest moving, and I realized I was looking at dozens of people in cloaks coming out of the area we had just left. It was without a doubt the scariest thing I had ever seen. Once we were safely away from camp, we stopped at a nearby grocery store and used their phone to call the camp owner, who in turn called the police. They searched the place and didn't find anything, but that ended up not mattering, because it turned out to be the last season that camp ever had. When the next summer came, the camp owner abruptly announced he was closing the doors and only offered a vague money-related reason. But Violet had some connections to local police through her cousin, and word is that one night, not long after our final night, the owner was there with some people and they were all attacked by a group of people in masks. The camp owner was scared enough he never even called the police. They only knew about it because a random person driving by called them, and the owner refused to press charges or say who did it. All he wanted to do was leave and never come back. Which he did, because he sold the camp to a property developer. Funny enough, there was an attempt to build an apartment building there after that, but nothing ever worked out. Every time the project was started something happened, like the foundation fell or there was a flood. The local media even started calling the project cursed. Personally, I don't disagree.